Look, it's his same old con. His same old con. Doubling down on ugly, misogynistic, racist lies as a substitute for real ideas and solutions that will actually make people's lives better. Look, because cutting our health care, taking away our freedom to control our bodies, the freedom to become a mother through IVF like I did, those things are not going to improve the health outcomes of our wives, mothers, and daughters. Shutting down the Department of Education, banning our books, none of that will prepare our kids for the future. Demonizing our children for being who they are and loving who they love, look, that doesn't make anybody's life better. Instead, it only makes us small. And let me tell you this, going small is never the answer. Going small is the opposite of what we teach our kids. Going small is petty, it's unhealthy, and quite frankly, it's unpresidential. So, why would any of us accept this from anyone seeking our highest office? Why would we normalize that type of backward leadership? Doing so only demeans and cheapens our politics. It only serves to further discourage good, big-hearted people from wanting to get involved at all. America, our parents taught us better than that, and we deserve so much better than that. That's why we must do everything in our power to elect 2 of those good, big-hearted people. There is no other choice than Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. No other choice. But as we embrace this renewed sense of hope, let us not forget the despair we have felt. Let us not forget what we are up against. Yes, Kamala and Tim are doing great now. We're loving it. They're packing arenas across the country. Folks are energized. We are feeling good. But remember, there are still so many people who are desperate for a different outcome, who are ready to question and criticize every move Kamala makes, who are eager to spread those lies, who don't want to vote for a woman, who will continue to prioritize building their wealth over ensuring that everyone has enough. So no matter how good we feel tonight or tomorrow or the next day, this is going to be an uphill battle. So folks, we cannot be our own worst enemies. No. See, because the minute something goes wrong, the minute a lie takes hold, folks, we cannot start wringing our hands. We cannot get a Goldilocks complex about whether everything is just right. And we cannot indulge our anxieties about whether this country will elect someone like Kamala instead of doing everything we can to get someone like Kamala elected.
We don't have any McCain Republicans in here, do we? All right, if you want to get the hell out.
Carrie Lake.
Good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101 on a Thursday night. We just a little snippet there from Sister Michelle Obama. You know, I'm cynical about American politics, as I've always been. That's a little bit shocking because I am a political scientist. I teach politics. But I tend to be cynical about American politics. But last night, that sister brought me to tears. And you know, when we Black people, when we shed tears, you know what it means. It's not that we're crying. It's not that we're complaining. It goes deep. It goes deep. God bless that sister. You know, Obama, Barack, he was good, but she went deep, 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 and we wish Kamala well. You know, those of you American citizens, go out and vote. And having Kamala in the White House is a million times better than having Donald Trump. You know, we Black people raise, all over the world, we raise the bar very high for our leaders. It's one of our strengths, eh? It's one of our strengths. We raise the bar very high, but it could be a weakness too, eh? Because sometimes we raise the bar so high, it's difficult to climb over the bar. Kamala is getting a lot of help. I mean, Michelle last night really pushed her over. Really pushed her over. Helped a lot, and she will need the help with your votes. This thing is all linked. This thing is all linked because we in Guyana are going through the same thing. If only we could get more of the Michelle Obamas to really come forward and speak, because she was speaking as a Black woman there last night. And part of the thing about our problem, about our politics in Guyana, especially our African Guyanese politics, is to really get our leaders, political leaders, civil society leaders, to really speak to their people, and speak to their people as Black people. And you know, we're doing a little bit better, because some of us, like our guest tonight, Eric Phillips, and myself and others, have decided that, you know, we're not doing it. We are not doing it, and we're thinking. You know, one thing came out last night when Michelle said, "Why do they fear us? Why the Donald Trumps of this world fear us?" And she, you know, two educated, hardworking people, referring to herself and her husband, who happen to be Black, you know, and it is that kind of rhetoric that we don't get from the successful Black people in Guyana. You know, they hide. They would never, you know. Because in Guyana, that is what Eric is asking in his exchange with Rafi Dev and them. Why do they fear us? They are Indian rights activists, and they don't talk about Indians. They spend most of the time talking about Black people. You know, slavery, they say, you know, they dismiss it. Oh, indentureship is like slavery, you know. We talk about reparations. If you get reparations from the government, it's double dipping. They spend more time talking about Black people than talking about them. We don't talk about Indian people. I think it's a respect. You don't find Eric Phillips, David Hines, you know, Vincent Alexander talking about Indian people in negative ways. We don't have to. We have our own issues. But all our issues, the so-called Indian rights activists spend more time talking about. Well, and we have to ask, why do they fear us? Because it has to be fear that drive them to, at every twist and turn. And so we have our issues in Guyana, and we are calling on the Michelle Obamas in Guyana to really let your voice. So many people ring me today and call me and text me, "Did you listen to Michelle last night?" And I said, yes, I did. And I said to them, when are we in Guyana going to stand up like Michelle Obama and speak truth to power? When are we going to do that? I continue to applaud those of you who come on to this program and other programs every evening and let your voices be heard. I continue to applaud you because you are doing human service to your group, your community, your country. Because if we can get it right as African Guyanese, the entire Guyana, every time we got it right, Guyana benefit. We got it right when we break down the gates of slavery. And that ensured that our sisters and brothers who came in did not come in chains. When we got it right, the rest of the country always get it right. And so I hope you're drawing the parallels between America and what's happening in Guyana, you know, what's happening in Guyana, because our issues are similar to the issues of Black America, Black Haiti, Black Africa. Our issues are the same. Our issues are the same. We don't like to use the word Pan-Africanism anymore, you know, whatever word we use. And so the issue of reparations has to be front and center. Reparations is not about we don't want nobody to come and put money in my hand. No. That's not what they would like you all to think reparations about that. Reparations is about repairing the disrepair that was wrought upon us when we were forcibly taken away from our civilizations in Africa and brought here and work for nothing. I don't care what else you talk about. Our people work for nothing. The other ethnic groups did not have to go through that experience. And one should not be ashamed. You look around, you know, we have this thing, we can never make a full-throttled statement about Black people in Guyana. We always have to say, but, in addition to, because they're the vultures who are waiting there to call you racist. We are the victims of racism. And however much they try to change the meaning of racism, they can't, because we have written through our experience, we have written the primer on racism. That racism is a subject of interest, a subject in education, is because of us. And I said on the weekend at the Coffee 250 conference, that if I have anything to do with power, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to start teaching Black studies in our schools. Because if our Indo-Guyanese brothers and sisters, Chinese and Portuguese and all of them, is to get a true understanding of the Guyana they live in, they have to study slavery. Because it's slavery that made them come here. Because after we beat slavery, reparations were given to things. And they are the objects, the subjects of the notion of white reparations. And so they have to understand slavery. And that's why it has to be on the curriculum. Walter Rodney already has a little booklet called Kofi Badu Out of Africa. And all those in the PPP who talk about they love Walter Rodney, they still ain't got that book on the curriculum. And it's a major shame that at the University of Guyana, there's not a Black Studies unit or department. A major shame. At Mona in Jamaica, they've gone forward. They have a center for Black thought. Here in Guyana, we don't. We fudge it around ethnic studies and all those. Ethnic studies, not race studies. I teach in a Black Studies department. I know what a Black Studies department is. I helped to build a Black Study department. And it's a major shame that in a country of the 1763 and the 1823 revolutions, that you don't have a Black Studies department. We have a history department, and you can study Black history in a history department, but Black history in a history department is coming at Black history from a Eurocentric perspective. What Black Studies does is that it comes at the Black experience through the lens. You see, a history department and the English department, those are general departments. They don't use the Black lens. They use a general lens. Black Studies, you use the Black lens to tell the Black story through the Black experience. And we're gonna get a Black Studies department at UG, so that we can study slavery, we can study 1763, we can study 1823, we can study the village movement, we can study reparations through the Black lens. That is what Black Studies is about. Good evening to you all and welcome. Brother Eric is ready, and let's roll. We're going to be talking tonight. We're in school tonight because we want you all to understand. Walter Rodney's groundings with my brothers, when they told him that he couldn't teach African history at the University of the West Indies, he went onto the streets and taught it there. And that was 1968 when they banned him in Jamaica. 56 years later, we still not teaching Black Studies at the University of Guyana, his own country. We're not teaching African studies in his own country. And so what we are doing here is that we are doing Walter Rodney kind of groundings. We are coming in the public space like this and teach Black history. Brother Eric, good evening.
Good evening, Chief Uhuru. How are you?
I am doing quite fine, my brother Chief. And it's always a pleasure to have you on. You have been ringing this bell relentlessly for a long time, and you continue to do so. And as Michelle Obama said, they come after you because they fear you. I think it was Bertolt Brecht who asked, why do they fear the open word? And in this case, we're asking, why do they fear Black men and women who are prepared to come into the public space and to say, we are, because we were, we will be. They fear us and they come after us. They're Indian rights activists, but they're not interested with Indian rights. They're interested in derailing Black rights.
Yeah, denying our rights.
Denying us our rights. My brother Chief, a Black Studies department at the University of Guyana, is it overdue?
You know, David, there's an Amerindian Research Institute at UG.
From the time I was a boy.
Right. And one of the head of it used to be on the Guyana Reparations Committee because it's about indigenous genocide and African slavery. And after about 3 months, the word was, we already have reparations through the Amerindian Act. So they withdrew. It used to be the head of the Amerindian Research Institute at UG and the head of the APA, Jean LaRose. And now Kisoon and all of them are saying that Amerindians don't have reparations, when the Amerindian Act of 2006 is a Reparatory Justice Act. But I also wanted to touch, before we get into other things, about the attacks. You're right. They're afraid of truth. They want their people to believe that Guyana started when they came here. And so anything that precedes that, 1823, 1763, even the Coffee statue, Coffee monument, is something they're trying to deny. They said that we talking black people business. This is what Amarak and Kisuna said. Hey, we just had a week of Amerindian Tashaw's meeting. They're talking Amerindian issues, but they're not telling the Amerindians that they shouldn't talk about Amerindian issues, but they're telling us not to talk about African issues. You know, Gopio, about 5 years ago, we formed an African Business Roundtable. Khan, Imam Khan, Roshan Khan, wrote a letter saying that if black people form a business association, then it's racist because they're talking about buying from themselves. This is the type of racism and anti-blackness that lies in Guyana. You know, and Gopio, which is a global organization of people of Indian origin, I wrote back to him and said, how could you say that this is racist when Gopio has a national convention where there are Indian business groups all over the world meeting in India every year? Ravi Dev went and spoke to them.
And invite them to come to Guyana.
Yeah, as kit and kin.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's this double talk. There's this nastiness when it comes to speaking about our issues. And even the institutions we're putting in place are anti-black. So we have an Ethnic Relations Commission, which is dealing with ethnicity. When in reality, what we need is a human rights organization. We need a human rights group, not a Ethnic Relations Commission. We need a Human Rights Commission because a Human Rights Commission is broader. It deals with different issues. We don't want to box everything that we're in into ethnic rights because that's a trap. Similarly, you know, you asked a very important question. Where are our Obamas, Michelle? You know, where are our Winnie Mandelas? Guess what has happened? The whole institution of Guyana is set up to make black women believe they're different from black men. Mm-hmm. So you give them oil blocks. So you're giving them special treatments. We are one family. This whole issue of feminism has been used to divide the black family. And that's why you don't hear black female voices, because they've been viewed in society and they believe it, that they're different from us. They're more special than us when they went through the same slave experience. It's this trap that we see all the time, these movements that are driven by white institutions or by white priorities that our people get caught in. So where are our Desmond Tutus? The church is the largest black organization in Guyana. It meets more than any other group every week, every month. Where are our Desmond Tutus? Because if the church is about justice, why aren't you not hearing any of our black priests talk about justice? They're quiet. They're I don't know what's the issue. So the black voices we should be getting from our institutions and from our major segments of the black community are suppressed. Why are they suppressed? You know, I remember when CARICOM had their event here, the heads of states. I was shocked when the prayers were being done. We had Hindu prayers, Muslim prayers, Christian prayers, and we had another group of prayers. All four of the people that said prayers were Indian. In a Guyana, where black people are dominant in the Christian church. These are the types of imagery that we don't understand, that is purposeful, because it had to be a purposeful decision to invite an Indian priest to do Christian prayers when you have an Indian Muslim and an Indian Hindu doing prayers. This symbolism, you know, tells us that we are worthless. You know, it is sad. And it's not necessary. We don't speak about Indian issues because we're not qualified to. So why spend your time coming into our issues, Because I know a lot of Indians call me and said they listen to the program and they're writing letters about it. They're listening to this program tonight because it's Black business. I do not tap into your meetings because you have to deal with your issues.
That's right.
And then there are national issues which we could deal with collectively. But don't spend all of your intellectual time demeaning us, discrediting us, devaluing our reparations, telling us we'll never get it. Well, Obama was never going to be president either.
That's right.
And don't come and bring indentureship into reparations so you could dilute our reparations movement, because indentureship is not a crime. And reparations, according to the international legal system, is a crime. So how could indentureship and African slavery, indigenous genocide be put together? How can you go to a court, a criminal court, ICJ, right, and have a case that is a combination of a crime against humanity and a labor contract? These are all strategies to slow us down. They're like Trojan horses. I'm just speaking the truth because we have to speak the truth. Stay out of our business. We don't go into your business. But you have this audacity to come and tell us who our leaders are. Kisun actually said to me, who gave me permission to speak on behalf of Black people?
Yeah.
You know, who elected me a leader? This is the type of thing. We don't tell them who they choose. We don't tell the Portuguese or Chinese who to speak on their behalf. And this is why there's a chilling effect on Black thought and Black intellectual development in Guyana, because people are afraid that if they talk, they'll be punished, because that's how the society is. The society is a racist society, and racism is a political system of giving and taking. You know, racism is a political system. If you, in Guyana, if you are anti a particular group, they take things away from you, right? And Keen Gibson wrote about that. It's a political system. It's not just about racism. It's about who gets assets and who gets denied assets.
Brother Eric Phillips here, Chief Eric Phillips. A white Guyanese was on, I think, a Freddie Kissoon program, and they were talking about politics. And, he said, well, the WPA will fade away, especially with the presidential candidate they have, because he brings baggage. And the baggage he brings is that he talks about race and he talks about Black people business. So feminists who talk about women business are okay. All right.
Amerindians who speak about Amerindian business are okay.
Are okay. But a party will fade away because its leader, presidential candidate, is speaking about Africa. Is what we grew up, Eric, and you grew up in a village. We get Kokobe. Why? Someone, Leonard Craig was on a program say, Nigeria is going to have a problem because in recent times, Nigeria advocacy has been for African Guyanese. So it's like, if you want to do well according to them in politics, don't touch African, touch anything else. It's okay for Nigeria to go in Amerindian areas and talk about the problems of, don't touch Africans. I put on the screen here what evidently an Indian brother or sister is saying. Shiv Singh. And I only put it because I'm not saying this is representative of the mass Indian view, but I'm saying it is a view in the Indian community and in the African Guyanese community too, that if you all talk about Black business, you all will not get one vote.
Yeah.
That then the political parties that are organizing and get the votes from African, when they see and hear this, they act on it. They act on it. Your comments.
Wasn't it President Jagdeo who in New York said that the PPP is an Indian party? Nobody jumped up and down.
That's right.
So they have agency to define themselves as who they are in their Indianness or in their Amerindianness, but we can't, because we're at the bottom of the ladder. We're not valued equally. We who died for this country, how many of them went to World War I? I mean, I went to World War II. I mean, when you start looking at the sacrifices we have made for this city, for this country, you know, it is because they don't teach it. They don't want to teach it, because if you teach it, our young people will have a whole different view of our Guyanese-ness, of our connectedness. But it's all these racial entrepreneurs who telling us we shouldn't talk about our issues. They should talk about it. Can you imagine that arrogance? They could talk about our issues. Kissoon writes every day about a black person, not about the Indian person. He doesn't write about corruption. He doesn't write about healthcare. He doesn't write about education, where we're failing math and English like if it's going out of business. But he wants to write about what Eric Phillips say, or what David Hines say, or what Vincent Alexander say. And yet the real issue is the food. And he's not writing about food basket. He's not writing about crime. He's not writing about local content. He's there to write anti-blackness.
Eric, we continue our struggle, and because at the end of the day, we are first and foremost speaking to our people, because
Yes.
we've got to deal with our problem. I said to the person who drew my attention to what that guy said about my baggage, I may represent baggage to him, but to African Guyanese, especially the African Guyanese poor, we not baggage to them. Because
David, I think I might have sent you 17 pages of racial epithets against us that are just mind-boggling.
Yes.
I hope that's a small percentage of the Indian population.
Yes.
The things they've called us, that they should poison us, don't ride on our buses, don't do this, don't do that. It is quite frightening that somebody would have created this fear of us in their community.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not something that's accidental. You're taught to hate. You don't be born coming out of your mother's womb hating people. And this is what, I mean, I went to Queen's College. My best friends are every culture in Guyana. We didn't think about race when we were in school, but I'm seeing on YouTube young people being taught to hate black people at
Yes.
age 5.
Yeah.
Is this the type of poison you're giving that young kid at that early age? But we have to ignore it and talk about our issues.
Exactly.
Because our issues are Guyanese issues.
Exactly. And with all due respect to our Indian Guyanese brothers and sisters, they may acquiesce to the fear, but Eric, I am sure you get the same experience. Whenever I have been in the communities and I've run into Indian Guyanese, they have been quite respectful to me.
Yes.
I was in Golden Grove at Simpson De Silva's wake,
Right.
and Indian males were
Yes.
coming up to me to take selfies or these
Yes,
pictures.
I had the same experience at the church there. Yeah,
Thank
but you
you.
know, David,
Mm.
I taught at University of Ghana for 12 years. The majority of my students were Indian.
Yeah.
I will ask any Kissoon or Ramba to go and ask those people about me. They're
Yes.
trying to position me as some racist. You know, go ask those students. They write me letters. They come to me for recommendations. Because I treat everybody equally. We're all human beings. We all have the same rights. Political parties should not define rights for people. And that's what's happening. The Constitution defines rights, and if it's not the proper Constitution for inclusiveness, we need to speak about it. You know, this Constitution that we have is the heart and soul of Guyana's problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember years ago when I was talking to who? It was Ramjatan. When I wrote that bad political systems create bad leaders, he said no. If you got a winner-take-all constitution, it will create winner-take-all leaders. It won't create leaders that are deal with inclusion or are visionary. If you have a shared governance constitution, the leaders who evolve out of that will be leaders that are inclusive. It's common sense. He said, but people are good or bad. Systems determine your behavior. Systems create cultures. And that's what we don't understand. We don't have any visionary leaders. Because the real test of a visionary leader in Guyana is somebody who will say, we need to change the constitution from winner take all. That is the fundamental test for a visionary leader in Guyana. Because if they were to understand the geopolitics we're operating in, they will understand that that's the best system for all Guyanese.
Brother Eric Phillips, Chief Eric Phillips here tonight, and we are discussing race relations in Guyana. We want to pay attention. One of the things, Eric, that those fellas over there are taking you up on is that they are trying to redefine the meaning of reparations.
Yes.
I mean, that's a low blow. They're trying to redefine the meaning of reparations to isolate African Guyanese out of the scent of reparations.
Yes.
And to make reparations this wishy-washy thing.
Yes.
For
now that there's progress. Now that there's progress.
Now that there's progress. All the time.
David, if people understood indentureship in the Caribbean, you know, who is this famous Guyanese Barbadian singer who is making billions of dollars? She lives in England now. Right? Barbados has embraced us. We haven't. Right? Her father was an Irish indentured servant named the Fenties.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to include indentureship, you have to go back all to that. And then you see that it's a whole different situation. But they're trying to devalue reparations. They're trying to confuse it. But you made a statement, and I wanted to reiterate it because this is the heart of it. And this was by Professor Chinwezu in 1993. He said reparation is not just about money. It is not even mostly about money, he argues. In fact, money is not even 1% of what reparation is about. Reparation is mostly about making repairs, self-made repairs on ourselves, mental repairs, psychological repairs, cultural repairs, organizational repairs, social repairs, institutional repairs, technological repairs, economic repairs, political repairs, educational repairs, repairs of every type that we need in order to create a new sustainable society. More important than any money to be received, more fundamental than any lands to be recovered, is the opportunity the reparations campaign offers us for rehabilitation of Black people or people of African descent. Opportunities for the rehabilitation of our minds, our material condition, our collective reputation, our cultures, our memories, our self-respect, our religions, our political traditions, and our family institutions. But first and foremost, for the rehabilitation of our minds. That's what he said. It's not about money.
And that is most important. The definition of reparations, because they think it's just about money and so on. I mean, you know, Eric, it bothers me, you know, that the way in which they just want to redefine Black people as men.
After 10 years, after 10 years of success,
yeah. You know, last night I had to make the point that, you know, in my community there in Buxton, I move around, you know, I go to funeral, after funeral, you know, people gather, they take a drink and so on. And I would ask ladies, you want a beer, you want 2 beer? And they would pull me aside, say, David, me I want beer, give me the money
to buy food,
to go and buy food for tomorrow. And don't let us see, put it easy in my hand. 2 things. One is that they got their priorities right. Second is that they get pride. They don't want nobody to see them begging. And to see them lambaste those, or because when I think about Black people, I'm not really thinking about people like you and me. We have done fairly well. It's the average sister and brother out there that I think about. And those people have dignity. And for people
it's in all races. The dignity of, you know, the values, the core values are the same. It's the political system that now imposes the hate, the winner take all, the disrespect. I mean, presidents should not be speaking in particular ways to people. Politicians in general, shouldn't be speaking down to people. You are our servants. We're not your servants, but in a winner-take-all, it's turned upside down. We don't create leaders in a winner-take-all system. We create bosses, because leaders create other leaders. Bosses create followers. And that's what winner-take-all does. Because we have a constitution where one person decides who becomes ministers. It's not a constitutional where you can go to your constituency and vote for this person to be in the parliament. It's a boss situation. It's like organized crime.
Yes. And Rafi Devon they like to talk about Indian people not falling for instant gratification, and that African people are into instant gratification. So African people must have party. They mustn't drink a beer. You know, I go in Indian communities, they drink beer just like black people.
But David, here is the biggest irony. For over 200 years, we got no money. We were waiting to be paid. Is that instant gratification? 200 years, we didn't get a penny. You know, it is so sad, but it's how they create the narrative, and they fool their own people. I grew up in Maikoni. I grew up in Wikina, my family. Everybody lives the same simple life. My father was a chemist and druggist. My grandmother delivered everybody from Mahaika to Maikoni and the creek. When there was a tough pregnancy, they would come and stay in Dundee, Maikoni. We grew up as the same people. We fetch water together. We plant things together. We fly kite together. And then this political system, this need to be superior, which is what a winner-take-all system.
Yes.
We talk about all these intellectuals. Winner-take-all means they're winners and losers. That's incompatible with our motto of one people, one nation, which destiny, which means everybody is a winner. So there's a contradiction even in their intellect. If they can't see that winner-take-all means division, that it means losers and winners, and you have a loser with 49% of the vote.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Where you're totally excluded from even changing one dot in a budget. How can that be one Guyana? You know, one Guyana is about inclusion. You can't have a one Guyana with a winner-take-all constitution. It's incompatible. That's common sense.
Eric, Dev has been talking about this, what he calls this one Guyanese narrative. He liked the term narrative.
Yeah, narrative.
This one Guyanese narrative. And we must strive for one Guyanese narrative. When you listen to his narrative, which is an Indian supremacist narrative,
yes,
that is the narrative he wants to impose on us. All right? He says, well, we don't only talk about Indians, we talk about Africans. Yes, you talk good about Indians and you talk bad about Africans. And you want to make that the national narrative. Eric Phillips, should we accept that?
We will never. And he knows that. That's in our DNA. We fought 1763. We fought 1823. Damon fought in 1838. That was the first nonviolent. He raised a flag in protest. Way before Mahatma Gandhi, way before Martin Luther King learned that from Mahatma Gandhi. Damon in 1838. Nonviolent resistance to colonialism. And if I say that, they're going to say I'm depreciating Mahatma Gandhi. I'm not. I'm just giving you a historical fact.
Brother Eric Phillips here, Chief Eric Phillips here tonight. Chief, talk to us a little bit about the reparations, because it's over the last 10 years, a lot of ground has been covered.
Right.
And we don't get a systematic reporting on what's been going on in the media.
And I'm glad you're asking about that, because people don't understand what's going on. In July 2013, there was a unanimous resolution passed by the heads of states in Trinidad. Kamla was the president at the time there. And it essentially said we will pursue reparations from European nations, and that each country of CARICOM should set up a national committee and that the heads of those national committees will form a commission to be led by Sir Hilary Beckles, and that commission will report to and be guided by a prime ministerial subcommittee on reparations, of which Barbados would be the chair. So Frondel Stewart was the first chair. When Mia Mottley became prime minister, she now chairs the current one. And on that prime ministerial subcommittee of reparations, it's Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Suriname, and St. Vincent, because Ralph Gonzalez was very important, together with Sir Hilary Beckles, in making the case for reparations. Now, they said that each national committee, the head of that committee should be appointed by the president. And then that head will then go into the African community and work to present commissioners to the president, who will then approve them. So after I was named head of the Guyana Reparations Committee, and I want to explain how that happened. In 2013, it was the 250th anniversary of the Coffee Revolution, and there was also a big anniversary on indentureship. Dr. Rose, who was the director of culture at the time, invited Sir Hilary Beckles, Vereen Shepherd, and Clem Chicharan to speak at the Umanayana on this anniversary. For some reason, me not being a historian, Dr. Rose selected me to chair those meetings. So I chaired the Sir Vereen Shepherd and Sir Hilary Beckles meetings. I'd never met them before. And I can't remember who chaired the Clem Chicharan meeting. So when CARICOM made the resolution, Director Rose recommended me to President Ramatar. And we had an event at the National Museum called Lest We Forget. And I was there in the audience, and I was surprised when he announced that I was the head of the Guyana Reparations Committee. Later that year, that was August, we had a meeting in St. Vincent where all the ministers of culture, several heads of states, and the heads of national committees were brought together to develop a strategic plan and an operational plan. And that strategic plan defined the 10-point plan. And the operational plan defined how you would do, advocate, educate people about reparations, about your history. And we had 4 terms of reference. The first was to go back and have a corrective history of your country. Second was to define the discriminatory actions that have led to today's condition of Africans. We did that. We have a book with it. It's 15 discriminatory actions. So each reparations committee was to be funded through the Ministry of Culture or Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In Guyana, our budget is funded through the Ministry of Culture. I do not get paid as the head of the Guyana Reparations Committee. I do not get paid as a vice chair of the CARICOM Reparations Committee. I do not have control of my budget. That budget is controlled by the Ministry of Culture, and every trip I make on reparations has to be cabinet approved. So I have nothing to do with the finances, even though a couple of years ago they said I was stealing the money when they didn't have any other. Now, in Guyana, we made 2 strategic decisions that are different from every other reparations committee. In all the countries of the Caribbean, only commissioners are invited to meetings. Now, we have 12 commissioners in Guyana, and they're from 7 African organizations. There are 2 youth groups. There's a land expert, and there's a person who deals with community issues. We also have a representative from Berbice, Eric Welcome, who comes down every Thursday from Berbice on his own coin to meet, because we meet every Thursday. We have a representative for Region 10, and we have a representative from Essequibo. So the 2 key strategic decisions we made, the first was we will meet every Thursday. And we've done that since 2014. Our first meeting was in January 2014. No one else does that. As a matter of fact, in 1 year, the Guyana Reparations Committee meets more than all the other groups combined. And we've been doing this for 10 years. And that's why we've done our books. We have TV programs. They don't have. We have the only reparations TV program in the world, monthly, and we have two. We have one for our youth. We're the only country in the Caribbean and in the world that has a Youth for Reparations Committee. Because young people have to talk to young people.
Mm-hmm.
And the second decision we made, apart from meeting every Thursday, is that it will be open to the public. Because this is public business. The commissioners in other countries are big doctors, they're this, they're that. It's about prestige. We're about work. So every week at the Museum of African Heritage, anybody could come. Whether you're African or Indian or Chinese or Portuguese, it's an open meeting. And that sustained us. And most of our people are women because they're the organizational vitality of the Ghana Reparations Committee. They're the ones that do functions, execute, go into the village. Because, men like to talk, but women do all the work. So we are unique in CARICOM. We are, I would boastfully say, the best reparations committee in CARICOM because of that decision to meet every week and to have an extensive program. We have Sankoka programs where we go into villages. We every major holiday, Emancipation, Holocaust, Black History Month, we have a significant program. And then, of course, the TV program, we try to make people feel good. We try to teach, etc. Now, the dilemma we have now as the Ghana Reparations Committee is that in the previous government, starting with Minister Anthony, who was incredible, Frank Anthony, in going to St. Vincent and supporting and nurturing the early days of the Ghana Reparations Committee, he allowed us to spend our budget how we wanted. So we would do an annual budget, we'd line item it, and here are the things. Never interfered. Same thing with Antoinette Henry. Same thing with Norton. Now we have a new minister of culture who is unrelated, who doesn't go to reparations meeting, who knows nothing about it, but he dictates how we can spend our money. He prevented us from going into the villages in February, which we normally do, because he didn't want us to go into the village before local government. So he started now to politicize the Ghana Reparations Committee and to make us IPARA. IPARA has their own budget. They have their own checks. We don't, right? We have a CARICOM mandate. And what is more important, I've been elected vice chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission by the other heads of committees, heads of commissions, and twice. This is my second term. And I was the one who went and nurtured Brazil and Colombia, because then I was the one who was the patron for the National Reparations Committee in Holland. I was in Holland 3 times last year nurturing them. They're part of it. So we have the National Reparations Committees, we have the National Reparations Commission, we have a Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Reparations. But because we needed to include civil society, we have the Caribbean Pan-African Network as an associate member. Because remember, you have to be a state.
Right.
Then we have the Organization of Indigenous People as an associate member. We have Rastafaris as an associate members. We have St. Martin as an associate member. We have a National Reparations Committee in Holland as a associate member. So we're growing and we're making it more inclusive. Now, one of the things that came to the Reparations Commission 2 years ago was by Ravi and his group in Indo-Caribbean Diaspora Network, that they wanted to join our Reparations Committee. Now, the reparations, as defined by CARICOM heads of state, is about indigenous genocide and African enslavement. And therefore, the heads of committees, because it's only Guyana, Trinidad, and Barbados, Trinidad and Suriname has that peculiarity, the majority of people said, no, this is reparations. And of course, in all the other committees in the Caribbean, they have indigenous members, like we had. But as I reported, the American Research Institute and the APA were initially members, and then they dropped out because they're saying, you're fighting for reparations. The Reparations Act, American Act, is reparations, even though Ravi and Kisun and all of them are trying to redefine it. So that's the situation. And the Guyana Reparations Committee started out with $5 million Guyana dollars, which is 25,000. which is totally inadequate. As you can remember, Ipadaji had 100 million. We had 5. And then when Granger came into power, it was increased to 10, and we were 10. 10 million Guyana dollars, which is 50,000. Our TV programs, twice a month, take care of 30% of our budget. And I don't believe we should be paying for it because we are a commission of Guyana. So why are we spending our money on TV programs? That should be free, because part of the mandate is to educate, to advocate, and to stimulate discussion. So our budget is used by the government, so to speak. 1/3 of it is for TV, which should be free. So that's it. Now we have a 10-point plan, which was voted on in Antigua, which has been evolved. The first point is an apology. The second point is about repatriation, which we are now calling resettlement. The third point is about an indigenous development program, which Guyana has in terms of the Amerindian Act. There's a Tashaus Council, there's an Amerindian Development Fund, there are Amerindian land rights, and all those other things, plus an Amerindian ministry. And then we have things like health. Because of the slavery experience, the Caribbean, and especially Barbados, is the amputation capital of the world because of diabetes and hypertension. Then we have illiteracy. Coming out of enslavement, 90% of our people were illiterate according to traditional definitions, and you're seeing that in our inherited educational system. Then you have psychological repair. We have technology transfer, and then we have debt cancellation, which is now financial repair. Now, strategically, our heads of states didn't want point number 10 to be financial repair. They were afraid of the backlash by European nations. So that's why CARICOM came together as a group to protect each other country from that European geopolitical backlash. And so initially it was about debt relief. Now it's about financial repair, including debt relief. But it's on the CARICOM website, and we in Guyana pursue that. And I'm part of the group rewriting the 10-point plan to include colonialism and the whole process. The process from when the Dutch first came here. Well, first Guyana was founded by the Spanish, then the Dutch, then the British. And we talk about independence all the way now to where Guyana is. So we have a very structured program. We have quarterly CARICOM Reparations Commission meetings. I was sent, for example, by CARICOM 3 years ago to South Africa to look at the traditional kings and queens, because now we have the Africa Union on board. That took about 3 years of work. We have the traditional kings and queens on board. So what we've been doing, we've been building coalitions. We launched the North American Reparations Commission at Medgar Evers in 2016. So because America needed that, they had NCOBRA, they had other groups. Now there are over 200 reparations committees in America. We worked with, I was invited to Colombia when the new Vice President Marquez, who's a reparationist, had a reparations conference before they were installed. And now I'm working with Brazil to bring Brazil on board so that the movement becomes a global movement. But we've had lots of success. The Dutch Prime Minister and the Dutch King apologized. 2 banks in Holland have apologized, ABN AMRO and the Dutch Central Bank. 5 cities in Holland have apologized, Utrecht, Rotterdam, Amsterdam. The Bank of England has apologized. The Church of England has apologized and have a 100 million fund. Lloyds of London have apologized. Universities have apologized. Families have apologized. So it took us 10 years to create the momentum that occurred 2 years ago, where people started to apologize and to put things in place. What we're fighting with now is that these constituencies, the monarchies, they're trying to define what reparations should be. The church is trying to define what reparations should be. Families are trying to define what reparations should be, when it is us who should be defining it. So take, for example, Lloyd's of London. They apologize, and they've put 12 million pounds to bring more people of African descent into insurance in the UK, and then they have a 40 million pound rotating fund for entrepreneurship. That's not adequate. The Church of England, they've apologized. They had a research project done, and now they're talking about entrepreneurship and all sorts of things. What I've been doing, working with a group within the CARICOM Reparations Commission, is we are mapping the 10-point plan against the monarchy, against families, against institutions. For example, the church. What was the most significant harm the church did? Psychological harm. So you can repair psychological harm with entrepreneurship. You destroyed our religions. You gave us this thing that we're inferior because we're worshiping a white God. You did dramatic damage to our psychological and mental. You gave us mental slavery because you were a partner with the colonial state in enslaving us. So if you're going to do repair, yes, we want entrepreneurship and we want community development, but how do you address the most significant damage you did to us, which was psychological repair, telling us voodoo is bad, destroying our gods, our concepts of God, when we were the first people that had gods? We were the first people on earth. Are you saying that for 3 million years, we had no spirituality, we had no religions? And yours is superior because you conquered us through trickery and superior technology with guns and all of that? So it's a broad process, and we are stepwise going through it. We're engaging now all the different people who have apologized. Guyana has the most apologies. There are 14 groups that have apologized to Guyana. And we should be putting a committee together of people who understand law and economics and corporate finance and all of that to go and negotiate with them. Because once you've apologized, you are accountable by law. If the Dutch have apologized and the Brattle report says you owe us $50 billion, then we should be negotiating with you. We've done nothing. And the Dutch apologized on the 19th of December, 2022. That's almost 2 years ago. So that is what we're dealing with. And of course, the geopolitics comes into that. And now this issue of reparations for indentureship is on our plate. So that's a broad stroke. The challenges, we meet every Thursday. We have several documents we've written. We have 2 reparations TV programs. As a matter of fact, this Sunday, we will have our Youth for Reparations program. Our reparations programs occur every second Sunday and every 4th Sunday of the month.
And that's on NCN.
NCN, because that's the national channel, and because we don't have money to put it in other channels, and because we had to go to the tender board. And so the tender board says you can only do it with NCN.
Any connection with the University of Guyana?
When I was first appointed chair, I wrote to Vice Chancellor Opedei asking for a lawyer, an economist, and a development person. He refused. And since then, University of Guyana was disconnected. Now, every other reparations committee got universities and university professors associated with them. The head, the most significant university is the University of the West Indies, whose vice chair, Sir Hilary Beckles, is also chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. So there's linkage. Suriname and Guyana do not have linkage. But I wrote to Dr. Paloma Mohammed, and she has given us 3 names. So we're now bringing them in, but that's 8 years after. And that's a big gap. But what it did do, David, and the ancestors are working. I think if we had a historian from day one, we would have never realized that 3 of the indigenous groups came to Guyana 100 to 200 years after Africans were brought here. Because it's in none of our history books. The Waiwais, the Makushis, and the Wapishanas came to Guyana 100 to 200 years after we were brought here. In 1763, none of them were here, right? We found that out by mistake because Jonathan Adams and I started to do our research. And then I said, but there are only 300 YYs here. There must have been a massacre. There must have been something. But then we went back in history and we found no massacre. And we found that they came from Brazil. Same thing with the Wapichanas and the Makushis. And also, if you go into their history, and people don't like us talk about our history, the Wapichanas were anti-black when they fought the Rupununi, whatever you want to call it, because the Portuguese encouraged them not to appreciate a black government, and the Wapichanas were part of the Rupununi uprising. But we don't teach history because we believe we will make some people feel uncomfortable. But how will you build a nation if all of the history is not there? And then we forgive each other and we build. We build through national symbols, we build through national programs, we build through inclusiveness. That's not happening. And what is most surprising to me is that the party that represents African interests, if you want to call it that, the PMCR, they should be clamoring for history to be taught in schools. Because if history is taught in schools, it will benefit them the most. But they themselves don't call for it because they're not, I don't know. I don't want to get into politics.
Yes, that's one of the issues, burning issues in our community. Eric, thank you very much for coming through tonight and really giving us some important information, and before that, perspectives and analysis.
And we have this book, which is free. We printed 10,000 of them, which is called the Guyana Reparations Story. It's done in 4 booklets so that our young people could read it.
And
we only have about 1,000 left, but it's free.
Where can people get them?
You can get it from the Museum of African Heritage on Barima Avenue. Most people may not know there's a Museum of African Heritage there. It's where we meet every Thursday. And it's in the library there. They can give you one free and we'll replenish it. We have about 1,000 left out of the 10,000.
So you heard it there. You can get it. You can get in touch with Brother Eric, and he would be able to guide you where to get copies of those publications and other publications by the Guyana Reparations Committee. Eric, closing thoughts?
Well, without reparations, Caribbean society is at risk. If you look at climate change, if you look at what has happened because of slavery and indentureship, where we have one-crop economies, if we had a major earthquake, the tourism industry in the Caribbean would die, and a lot of people would lose their livelihoods. Why do you think Guyana was invited to go to St. Vincent, the Argyle, whatever it was, with Venezuela?
The Argyle, yes, the Argyle Agreement.
It wasn't because the heads of states in Barbados and Jamaica and Trinidad and all of them were interested in Guyana. They were interested in protecting their tourism industry. Because if Venezuela had done an incursion at Guyana, the whole region of peace would have been disrupted and their economy would have suffered. So we need to understand why these people do certain things. But the whole Caribbean is at risk. If you look at Grenada and the earthquakes, you look at the Bahamas, you look at all of that, we're lucky in Guyana. We don't have those things. So all of the Caribbean islands are at risk. They're high unemployment, youth and adult. And so they need to be repaired financially as well as the self-repair we talked about in order for Caribbean society to survive. Because it's only getting worse with climate change.
Yeah.
So that's the Caribbean. For people of African descent in Guyana, we are excluded essentially from the economy. Why? It's because of slavery, because we weren't paid for 200 years. And when we came out of slavery into independence, no one took our interests at heart. Chedi Jagan went to India and brought Korpalani and all these other groups here. The Chinese and the Portuguese, they escaped indentureship and they went into business and were supported by banks, right? You look at who owns all the banks. We do not have an African Guyanese private sector. And if you don't have an African Guyanese private sector, you cannot tender for contracts in oil. You cannot participate realistically in local content. So if you had a government that was interested in one Guyana, and by the way, I made this presentation at the conference center when I was at UG 5 years ago. I said, do not call our local content. Let us define it as national content. And I had a reason for that. Local content has global connotations, and we are locked into laws and practices. If we had national content, then it's Guyana first. Then it's Guyanese companies first. And then no country can come here and buy land. We give land to our people, our businesses, and they use that as equity to get into joint ventures and local content. And if we were truly interested, knowing our history of including African Guyanese, then we could have done many things. We could have said, okay, this local content contract will go to this particular business, but part of that is that it has as a subcontract certain African businesses, so that we develop all the different groups in Guyana using oil and local content. Because right now, African Guyanese are excluded from these massive contracts. And let me read what's going on. The budget in Guyana grew from 330 billion in 2020 to 383 in 2021 to 553 in 2022 to 782 in 2023 to 1,145 billion or 1.1 trillion in 2024. Now 70 to 80% of that is procurement. So if you don't have a private sector, if you don't have international partners, if you don't have technology, you're institutionally locked out from Guyana's development. And that's what's going on. So if you are a visionary leader, understanding that we have 100 and something thousand Venezuelans here, another 100 and something thousand people coming in for oil, over time, your small private sector will be overwhelmed and your economy will be totally gobbled up by other interests. So it's in your interest, if you want to have a one Guyana, if you want to have an inclusive Guyana, to do programs of a formative nature. Because all the other groups in Guyana have been affirmed, whether it's through indentureship payments, whether it's through land after indentureship, whether it's through getting grants. You know, people forget Oral John. He's getting up there in age. Oral John presented a paper 5 years ago that said 11,000 house lots were given to people of Indian descent in the sugar estates with a fund to develop and build housing. And that African villages were excluded to that because they had to be part of the sugar estate. That's a formative action.
Yes.
That's wealth creation. And if you look at the structure of the sugar estate, everything has been there. Health, education was free. So how can you compare that to our villages where we had to buy everything, where there were 12 things done against us to diminish our value, compared to an Indian village that has been informed through the sugar industry for all these years? And that's why I think the last government made a mistake. You can't go to a sector that has all these dependencies on the government and destroy it by reducing it. You have to have a transition plan. Sugar is not going to be profitable. We should be doing moringa, we should be doing all these other different things, but do it strategically and over time. But because of our politics of race, our politics of exclusion, our politics of winning and take all, and because there was no money during the Granger administration and heavy debt, certain actions were taken. But if you had all this money for oil, different decisions would be made. Mm-hmm. And I agree with Nigel Hughes. We need a group of people, our best and brightest, not the politicians, to create a national development plan for 15 years. Because we would look at things differently. For example, 75% of our oil, we're paying 75% of the cost. Why not find a way of converting that into equity? Because we're carrying 75% of the cost as an investment. We have no shareholding, and we have no equity, and we have no dividends. Look at what we did with bauxite. We sold bauxite for $1. 100 million tons of bauxite probably there for $1. If you were smart, you would have collateralized that asset in the ground and gotten billions of dollars to develop the bauxite industry, or to develop the solar industry, or to develop jobs for to develop education. I'm very, very worried, even though we're putting pictures of the cream of the crop in exams today. Every year, 12,000 of our students of all races go to exams, and 11,000 are lost.
That's right.
If you look at the labor document, 10% of our people never went to work. 24% of them only have private primary education. 28% only have secondary education, and less than 0.2% of our population have degrees. How can you do that in an oil economy? We need to remission our education system. And the only way you're going to do that is to get away from winner take all. Because winner take all is about domination, about who's going to lead. We need 5,000 leaders. We don't need 100 best top students. And then they're doing 28 and 29 and 30 stuff.
Oh, man.
That's child abuse.
Oh,
you're abusing our children.
That is, yes.
And that's because we have this sense that we're going to have students with all these degrees. It shows a superiority of race. But in essence, it's a superiority of class. People who can afford lessons, who can get to the best schools. You know, it is backward. We need to remember that whilst we are fighting these two major races, there's an African proverb. When two brothers fight, the foreigner takes away the house and the assets. And that's what's going on. We should have a collective parliamentary decision on our oil sector. We shouldn't have it to be telling Exxon, giving Exxon permission, notice 24 hours before we go on the rig. You know, if we're dealing with carbon credits should be shared fairly. The indigenous people are getting carbon credits, and that's due. But all of our villages, according to LCDS, are a threat. All of the villages along the East Coast should be also getting carbon credits. Because if you look at 2005, we lost 60% of GDP in 2 weeks, and it's going to become worse. So what are we saying to our villages? That only Amerindians should get carbon credits? They deserve it. But African villages also deserve it. Indian villages along the East Coast also deserve it, so as they could start preparing for 2030, when there's a projection that we'll have a serious problem. So you can't create a one Guyana when people are excluded from decision-making, from conceptualizing development. Because, you look at QC, everybody is bright. All races are bright. You know, it's just exposure. It's not that one race is brighter than the other. If you start coming to that, look at the great civilizations by Africans. So we get into this race issue, which becomes an ethnic issue, which becomes a class issue. And then you corrupt the entire society, because you're not dealing with inclusion, you're dealing with exclusion. Historic exclusion, institutional exclusion. And a lot of this is known. That's why I'm saying we have no visionary leader in Guyana. Because if you have a visionary leader, regardless of what race you are, you would change the constitution to make it inclusive, especially since we have oil. So reparations is essential for people of African descent if they're going to get any part of the wealth in Guyana. Because without reparations, people of African descent are excluded fully from the Guyanese economic arrangements, as we can see today. The GDP has grown from 6,000 to 20,000. Africans have gotten nothing because they don't have a private sector to participate in oil local contact contracts. Indians could go to India and find technology. Chinese could go to China and find technology. We don't know which part of Africa we came from. Where are we going to go? And then Africa is not one country. It's 55 countries. So we're not given the same equal opportunity as other races, because slavery was a crime and indentureship wasn't. You came with your culture, you came with your historical connections. An Indian could go to the archives and find out where they came from or their ancestors. Where are we going to go? We know we're from West Africa, but where are the business relationships? Where are the cultural relationships? Identity and culture are different. We're making it the same. You know, that article by Professor George K. Dans, everybody should read. It's called Race, Ethnicity, and Identity. It's an incredible article. We don't even debate these articles. We don't have intellectual discussions. All we got is beating down on one race or the other. How are we going to grow intellectually to understand the threats that are facing us? That's why we have a bad contract with Exxon, because we didn't have the best and brightest people dealing with it. We had politicians. And that's why we wouldn't renegotiate it, because we don't have the best and brightest people saying that we could convert this debt into equity, or we could do a clawback to local content in strategic sectors, or we do a circular economy, or we will say to Exxon, we want to own 20% of the block. We'll buy it, because if you look at the long-term revenue flows, it's better to go and get $1 billion. Suriname is going to take 1.8 billion and buy 20% of their block. Why can't we do the same thing?
Yeah. And that is why we need a national petroleum company.
Yeah, commission.
That can bid for these blocks.
Yeah.
You know, it's
already been de-risked because oil is there. So it changes the financial architecture.
That's right.
And I don't understand why all these bright people don't see common sense things. It's because they don't want to.
We should have a national oil company that is going in there and bidding on those blocks.
And doing partnership. Okay,
and
you can have the block, but we're getting a carried interest of 20%.
Yeah.
Or we'll pay you out of dividends, special purpose vehicles. All of this is not new stuff.
No, but they want to give it to their friends and so on. But Eric, thank you.
So reparations will also do something significant. It'll help to repair us mentally, physically, spiritually, academically, emotionally. And all Guyanese need to be repaired, not just people of African descent.
That's right.
Because the winner-take-all system has destroyed us. Has destroyed the lifelong relationships we created in school when we didn't think about race.
But Eric Phillips, thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, my brother.
For coming through. And we shall keep in touch. And to your audience, of course, whenever Chief Eric comes here, it's a wealth of information, perspective, knowledge, things that we don't normally think about. And that's part of what this is about. It's about empowering us mentally, intellectually, because you can't fight just physically. We have to fight with our intellect, and we have to fight with information. I'll see you all tomorrow night when we come back with another edition of Politics 101.
If you hear that, black is beautiful. Santa Claus. Black is beautiful. It's a textile. Lift your head like me. You got to wear